That's why Legend came after, because the CDM concepts, it's something that, as I said, I was working on, and then I took Legend as a tool, the source, good community, good support. I use that to present for my clients these data mesh concepts and how they could use governance tools to apply them in a way more, again, steady but slowly, in a sense that they are still even learning what data mesh is and what exactly a data contract could bring.
Yeah.
Right. And going deeper on the Legend, reading on all the documentation and so forth, I started to go deeper on the CDM. CDM, I heard here and there. I won't lie to you. However, at this tough time, I had the opportunity to go deeper on some of the core concepts on the CDM model. And there, going deeper and deeper, I realized that really align on things that I'm presenting to my clients and the project that I'm working on as a parallel.
Hey there, before we get started, I just want to remind you about OSFF. That's the Open Source and Finance Forum. For London, it is June 24th, and for New York, it is October 21st and 22nd. It's a great place to get together with your colleagues, both in banking technology and also a lot of great vendors that, are in your community too, and learn. And the hallway track is always the best. But I wanted to quickly mention and thank our sponsors. First, the FinOps Foundation, both in London and New York, GitLab, OS Climate, Red Hat, Temporal, Control Plane, Gradle, Interop.io, Causley, LF Decentralized Trust, Modern, Scott Logic, Spectro Cloud, Tetrate, and Turntable, all from London. We're excited to work with all of them this year. Some of them are new, some of them are members, and it should be a great time. And as of recording this, we're 18 days from the conference and looking forward to an incredible time. It always has been in London. And then New York, our leader sponsors are the Confidential Computing Consortium, FinOps Foundation, again, like I said, and Red Hat. Red Hat has definitely been working with us for the past couple of years, but, really enjoying the collaboration with them on these conferences. We also have OpenSSF, Temporal, Discover, Gradle, Interop.io, Causley again, Sauce Labs, Sonatype, SUSE, and Tetrate. So please support those sponsors because they're supporting us. They make the conference free for the majority of our members who attend. So join us, have a great time, and hope to see you either in London or New York later this year. Thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Grizz Griswold of FINOS. Hope you're doing well. Today on the podcast, I have a new friend of mine, Daniel Paes, and I met Daniel a couple of weeks ago in New York during API Days, where he was a speaker for FINOS. He's also a FINOS Ambassador, but I'm going to let him tell you more about him. So Daniel, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Ariel. Nice to meet you. Well, nice to be here with you.
I totally.
Still getting a little starting the week vibe.
Yeah, no, exactly. We are recording this on a Monday morning, so yeah, we're both just trying to. I think I'm past waking up. I got up at like 5:30 this morning, but that doesn't mean that I'm anywhere close to coherent. So we're good. We're good to go. So like I said, I met Daniel a couple of weeks ago. He's a FINOS ambassador, and he does some other stuff as well. But Daniel, I'm going to let you talk for a little bit and tell us about you, what you do, and then I'm going to ask you some questions and go into your background a little bit, if that's cool.
Of course. Yes. So my name is Daniel. I've been living in Canada for almost 11 years now. I started my career in Brazil, always on data. At that point in time, as a business intelligence analyst. And I used most of the stack that was common at that day, such as Oracle, Informatica, MicroStrategies. And moving on, I started to go deeper on open sourced approaches. At that point in time, I worked a lot with DevTools Community Suite. And from there, I realized the power that open source could bring to, sometimes, sorry about my French, but bloated tools. In a sense that, because in a sense that, it was really costly. And that really took my attention because I am a hard user, a Linux user. And my 18, 17 years, I've been using Ubuntu and moved all over the flavors, coming to Fedora, had, and now I'm really an Arc user, really happy.
Okay.
And going there, so I always stuck on limitations of the tools, right? That I was talking to. I just realized that things could be smoother, not only for the departments that I was representing, but also for the developers.
Yep.
And then I started to, well, if my memory is too good, I started to go deeper on the open source community in 2009.
Okay.
And then I started to go really, well, at that time I was still in Brazil. So I didn't got that much openings and opportunities to go deeper as I wanted it at that time.
Yeah.
But things evolved, and I was lucky to be able to move to North America. And I lived a little bit in Toronto. Now my base is really in Montreal. And here, well, what can I say? Things here are really popping. The AI community is strong. The cloud, all the cloud providers that we have here, all the good competitors that we have here, and the value that we can bring with open source tools are, well, immense. And that's pretty much it, I would say.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So let's actually go back, because I wanted to ask, especially like you, it sounds like you grew up on Linux, and I've always wondered, from, obviously I'm centered in the US and was born here. And so like I was born on Atari systems and ColecoVision. Oh, those are video games. I was born on
Same here.
Atari, like the Tandy 3600 or whatever they were, and then moved into the DOS, getting into Windows, and then I actually made the move over to Mac. And I will say that, like, as somebody who had access to a lot of that, like, it was hard for me to use a Linux system. And I'm just thinking about what you're saying. But in Brazil, growing up, like, I would imagine that, and stop me if I'm wrong, but using an Apple when you were starting, using Windows was probably prohibitive to a bunch of people. So is using Linux part of where you're from? I just wondered.
Well, actually, no. And
Okay, good.
we're talking about, oh no, short answer, not at all.
Cool. Good to know.
In a sense, we are talking about early, well, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And at that time, well, Microsoft was all over the place.
Right.
I learned about Linux actually in a forum, in a Merck forum, about other things. And then I took, well, I saw at that time, Canonical had a really huge marketing thing, and they could send a disk, an Ubuntu disk, anywhere on the globe.
Yes. Yep.
And well, to be honest, in Brazil, at least at that point in time, and I don't think it has changed that much, licensing, software licensing was really expensive.
Yeah.
And I needed to find a way to have this part of informatics and all this the system analysis, again, starting point, right? Because was everything new. I was, as I said, 17, 18 years old. And I had this opportunity to have, well, something that was a really wild plate for me, right? So it was only put the CD, installing. Yes, it wasn't that easy at start, coming from bat scripts into shell scripts, right? Understanding what is the kernel and all those intrinsics that after a while, it made more sense. But, and after that, I just realized that, again, a company that I didn't know where it was able to send me a CD for free, 17 years old. And I started, well, at that time, I didn't have that mentality. I was really, well, I didn't want to pay for something because I couldn't. But right, sure. So it's pretty much, well, let's face, I was young and I was lucky, right? Because I had this way of reaching out things. Now, I would say that Brazil is really way more mature if we talk about open source. We even had a Brazilian distribution called the Kurum of Linux a couple of years ago. That was even being sold as Microsoft or Mac computers with a built-in already all configured and costing way cheaper. But at that time, I already had my computer, I already had my distribution, but it's evolved anyways.
Right. That's cool. And then I wondered too, like, what would you say is the, I guess, the consumption amount and contribution amount of, I know you haven't lived there for 11 years, but of Brazil, maybe back then and even now. I only say that because we did have a Brazilian bank,
Itaú, imagine.
Itaú, yeah, Itaú, and they seemed to be very into it, and it felt like, but sorry, no, not talking bad about them at all. It's just the membership fell off, and I've always wondered, like, what is the amount of pickup of open source in general, not just in banking in Brazil, if you had an idea, and if not, that's
Well, to be honest, that's all good. Well, I would say that Brazil, from not only Brazil, even here in Canada, I see some similarities on the tech stack. And in that sense, I'm seeing a lot of, I would say, tagged pay tools that are based on open source. And I'm targeting precisely Spark. Let's face it, we have Apache Spark that we are running our clusters, and we have Kubernetes, core projects that on data pipelines built a lot of not only community interest, but good developers. So I would say that nowadays, Brazil, if we're talking precisely on Brazil, I do see a lot of engagement on the security information and everything that comes around it. So I would say that they are really, I would say, using a lot the open source tools, but with different tags.
okay. Okay, I got you. Okay, so let's go forward a little bit. And do you want to talk about some of the roles or whatever that brought you to where you are now?
Sure, yeah. So as I said, I started as a analyst developer on BI in Brazil. I evolved my career, and still in Brazil, I went to architect, well, business intelligence architect. And there I got not only the front end, but also the back end on some domains such as insurance, banking, and telecom companies at that time. I did have a project on energy sense for gas petrol, if I'm not mistaken by the name, but was related to combustion and this energy piece that was starting to grow in Brazil on the early 2000s, I would say. So there I had really an opportunity to evolve in my career on not only grabbing development purely, but also understanding why I was developing. And I would say raising the ranks, I started to get closer on the business level. And at that time, I started my own small company, which I was able to manage my own contracts. And that was evolving good, right? I believe well, all of us that are related on open source, according to stories that I had, we had similar paths. So I believe that I was one of the others in saying that I started with a small company that was only myself. And moving on, I just realized that in Brazil, we had some limitations that at that point in time were geographical. We weren't that global, and the information and even technology were, I would say, difficult to reach.
Okay.
And at that time, I started to create some plans on, well, living abroad. I thought at first for a small period of time, but I was open to extend if needed. So at first, I moved in 2014 to Canada. I, well, dropped back a little bit and started as a new developer because no one knew me. I came from a background that, well, yes, let's make it honest, right? I came here with a luggage, pretty much $300 and tried to make my living. And I was lucky again. And I was able to, before, of course, I did some, I would say, market analysis or things that I could grow. But overall, I was lucky to find that Canada at that time was the way that I was expecting to be. And I started to grow my ranks. So I started as a BI developer here as well, but I grew slowly but steady on good companies here. And I ended up now as a principal director of CloudOps and DataOps of a SB Group, which is a company which has base in Paris.
Cool. So, and that also probably makes sense on the Montreal connection, I'm assuming.
Yes.
I'm getting it.
However, during this time, even though now I am fully based in Canada, I say after moving to Toronto, I was able to work for some US companies as well. That's why I started to, well, take more advantage on these, I would say, neighborhood relationship that Canada, US has. And that's one of these trips that I took even knowledge about the Linux Foundation groups and even the FINOS groups. And these projects I worked for around 3 years in the past. And now I'm taking back this new, well, not this new, I'm taking back this network to really coming back on events like the FINOS and Linux Foundation. Well, any open source foundations approach that I really think that it's a way to go. And even the big players are getting the grasp of it.
Good. And so I guess two things, and I'm thinking about, and we can go either direction. Like either what are you working on now, kind of in project space, or does that tie back to what you talked about at API Days a few weeks ago? So whichever direction you want to go.
To be honest, I believe we can go on the API direction because the things that I'm working on are related.
Okay. 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 So you talked about Legend, I believe, and
Yes,
so yeah. Te- what interested you in FINOS and Legend or anything? And then maybe we start there and then keep going deeper.
of course. Legend, okay, starting slowly. I took a Legend. Windows Legend is a really good governance tool that I honestly just saw a couple of weeks ago. And I'm thinking that's mature enough to present to some of my clients. And at that sense, I wanted to, well, explore a little bit, not only the tool itself, but one of the projects that Finos has, that's the CDM or
Mhm.
command domain model, that are really a way that I foresee how we should handle our data pipelines. So the presentation that I got was really on how the CDM concepts can be applied on on tools like Finos Legend to have, I would say, a developer friendly experience on data governance and even testing. So, and with all of that, I was planning to try to illustrate how a data mesh concept could be applied using open source tools.
Okay, cool. As far as the CDM is concerned, we're it's gonna kind of say like, when did you find out about that? How does that really mesh with what everything else that your company is doing or clients are looking into? Did Legend come first, or did CDM come first for you, or I just
Yeah, well, okay, to be honest, the CDM concept is something that I'm actually working a couple of years now because it's, in my opinion, it's a way of implementing the data mesh concept.
okay,
So I really don't want to lose ourselves on the nitty and gritty about the terms, but the idea is really to have those contracts, the data contracts that are easy to follow and easy to trace. So using tools like Legend, it allows us to have the governance glossary that show us not only the structure of the objects that we are using, but also all the functions that we use and the conditioners that were passed to get that information in that precise of granularity.
okay. And you think that it'll be more helpful to developers understanding governance?
Oh yeah.
Good.
Oh yeah, because oh yes, that's why Legend came after, because the CDM concepts, it's something that, as I said, I was working on, and then I took Legend as a tool, the source, good community, good support. I use that to present on for my clients these data mesh concepts and how they could use governance tools to apply them in a way more, again, steady but slowly, in a sense that they are still even learning what data mesh is and what exactly a data contract could bring,
Yeah.
right? And going deeper on the legend, reading on all the documentation and so forth, I started to go deeper on the CDM. CDM, I heard here and there. I won't lie to you. However, at this opportunity, I had at this tough time, I had the opportunity to go deeper on some of the core concepts on the CDM model. And there, going deeper and deeper, I realized that really align on things that I'm presenting to my clients and
Right.
the project that I'm working on as a parallel.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I think Jane Gravansky, our COO, would be, I know she was there at API Days, but she'd be very happy to hear that because FINOS, the crossover of different members, especially if they're competitive members that are collaborating on the non-IP, is always a goal for us. But now that we have a larger set of projects, seeing them work together as well is almost better than the members working with each other sometimes, because when like what you're illustrating, when companies see the crossover and see how I can take this, and honestly, for Legend, I had always thought that it was big, like it's a big project, right? And it came from Goldman Sachs. So it was one of our first like really big, hefty projects. But sometimes when it's that big, something that big is hard to be ubiquitous, obviously. But
Yeah.
when you're able to apply across different projects and across different ways of thinking in order to come to a better way of bringing things together, that is gold for an open source foundation. So that is, I think, just in general, like we're in a podcast right now, but I would say like let's explore that further through a technical blog or something like that, because I think that definitely the work that you do that are for your clients is good, but maybe even part of open source, honestly, is when you contribute back, and you're doing that obviously as an ambassador. When you contribute back, even if it's a blog post that you make the funnel larger so that you can have, like on your side, maybe more clients will be more interested. But on the Goldman
Yes.
Sachs side, they have more.
Maturity on showing on things that were applied.
Exactly. But then also and Goldman Sachs isn't the only contributors to Legend, obviously. Like the larger the funnel is, the more eyeballs and people can actually work on these projects. Then it makes them better, more secure, all the above, and it makes it so that the work that you do with your clients should be even better as well. That's the hope, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, yeah. And going really getting a hook on what you just said is really showing use cases of these successful marriages, right? I'm talking about Legend and the CDM concepts. Even the AI readiness tools like Legend could help on the long run. So yes, of course, I'll be more than happy to, well, create a blog post about that, of course. And if we go a little deeper on that,
Of course.
if you allow me to say about the project that I'm working on.
Yes. What are you working on? There we go.
So, well, actually is one of the projects that I'm working as a full open source project. It's a way of implementing not only the things that I presented on the API days with the FINOS, but going a little deeper, because the FINOS tool is a tool that is based on Java, such as Spark.
Right.
And I'm actually working on something that will give the same level of quality, but costing less. And I'm basing myself purely on the language Golang and the Linux core.
Okay.
So I like to say that I'm building a Kubernetes for data that has governance and security built in.
Sweet. Nobody needs that, right, Daniel? Joking.
Well, no, I was walking with my dog and I just saw a tree and that's it.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Going back on that, really is a way that I don't stop there, right? Because the CDM concept, if you go really on the project, it really goes deeper on the domain model. And the domain itself needs to be more close to the machine than it is currently. So the way that I'm trying to translate is really getting functional requirements and, of course, some code, because the code needs to be on these data contracts. So the function behind of it, the why, and the code of how are built together and orchestrated using these herding concepts. And the herd, it's nothing more than a domain, which it's herd separated with different goals by what is called, the tool itself is called Runink, and it is split and the Go package, but also the iOS called the Runix. And it's split. And the idea is really to get the best on the compute that is available with, costing less and being able even to be run as a function and as a cloud function.
Cool. And I know that when in the show notes, what we'll make sure is we'll put a link to Runink as well. And so I'm assuming there's some documentation on there. So
Of course. We do have, we have a website. We do have some issues open page that anyone that think that the project itself has some worth on it, please feel free to join. One thing that I really like to talk about Runink is actually the algorithm that is based behind of it, because it's not really the Golang and the Linux, but also I'm implementing the REST consensus algorithm to help on the parallelism. So again, it's a really neat project. I'm really proud of it. And again, no one needs that, right? No one needs that.
That's good. And I think about smaller and larger open source projects. Again, getting to that concept you were talking about data mesh earlier, just reminds me of like project meshing, the taking the pieces. I'm assuming that you don't use necessarily, and especially if it's fairly new, the entirety of Legend, but you might take pieces of it that really make sense to build into what you have and go keep.
Well, I've talked. Well, and here, that's the thing. I'm still believe that the Legend is a good tool, and I will still advocate for the customers that they feel that they are needed. The only thing is the project that I'm presenting is really on the deepest level, not only on the governance, but it's really on the pipeline as well. So you can imagine the Legend, but with Spark behind of it, right? And even some, well, if you permit me to talk some other open source tools, Airflow data quality pipelines, like we are not using those, like the things that I saw from my experience that makes sense and works. That's something that's smaller. And again, the idea is really to give that for non-technical people to make them able to evolve their data, not only the governance piece and testing, because again, Legend is really good on the governance and the development lifecycle experience, and also the applied testing, the mapping test on the data itself, with even direct connection sometimes on the databases. It's good, it's solid, but it's a governance tool.
Okay.
The idea that I'm presenting is really a data platform that will handle not only the mapping tests as it's presented, but also all the pipeline that is needed behind the scenes with the production ready statements and conformity, of course, that to enable that more easily.
Okay, cool. Well, like I said, we'll have a link there and definitely on the good first issues. Like that is, if you were, I wouldn't even say a new developer, but if you are new to a project, the good first issues is really a place to go, open issues to go and see and understand what are the problems that the developers within this particular project have been facing. And that is a very good entry point, but also sometimes like you never know, a good first issue just may be something that you may not, as Daniel, may not have time to do. You know that it needs to be done, but you're working on core things, and then you start to pick up contributors to the project. So it's always, if you have an open source project out there, anybody, it doesn't have to be FINOS, like have good first issues that you need help on, because that is something that is core to open source and expands the collaboration base. So
yeah, I'm actually, thanks. I do have some issues that I'm working with, well, some close friends, right? But the idea is really to tackle at first also struggling points on domains that I saw. So I started first on the finance, but also transportation, supply chain, and e-commerce. Those are really, I would say, the main targets that we are seeing on the short, I would say, first year. I mean, they're a short notice in a sense. But yes, we're actually refining the first issues to not be so much, because first, Go is not a language that is that common among at least the data users, right? So there is also this onboarding that we're tailoring carefully, and hopefully the website helps on clarifying how the tool works behind the scenes, but also some use cases. As I said, there I believe that we have the clickstream data use case to showing, just to see how compile could work, how testing could work, and even how a run could work.
cool. Well, good. Well, thank you. And also, like, let's maybe end on, why did you want to be a FINOS ambassador?
Well, how can I say? It's the way that I see that I can have a voice and showing all these lessons learned that I had in the past. And then not only that, to be able to collaborate with the similar thinkers and having an exposition that I might not be able to have currently with my client base. I'm not saying about being faster or slow paced. I'm just saying that an organization like FINOS could allow me to discuss with people such as Morgan Stanley, for example, or Goldman Sachs, to get closer and even seeing how open source tools are being used for finance, get these lessons for myself and my client base as well.
All right. Good. That's a perfect reason to become a FINOS ambassador. So we're going to leave it there. And so now my expectation for you at some point is we'll look at working on a blog piece together, explaining again back to maybe that mesh phase that we were talking about for different things. And then, yeah, our call for speakers for OSFF New York. Again, I think I told you should have been out today, but it'll probably be out next week. And so by the time this podcast actually hits, it'll be out. And so I hope to see a talk or two from you there as well. And
You're working on that.
Good. And so I'm looking forward to hanging out with you again in New York City a few months down the road. But Daniel, thank you for taking time out this morning with me, and glad we got a chance to catch up.
Well, thanks for having me, man.
Cool. And so with that, I'm going to say good day, good night, wherever you are. Thank you.